I want my father and new mom, not you. Now my son wants to come back to me for money. I am done being used. There's no way to describe the sound of your own child walking away from you. It isn't loud or sudden, it's slow, deliberate, and excruciatingly final. When my son, Caleb, stood before the family court judge at 16 years old and told them he wanted to live with his father, I felt something inside me shatter. I sat in the courtroom, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the edges of my skirt. My lawyer's voice had become a low, indistinct hum in my ears. I was staring at my boy, the boy I had carried in my arms when he was sick, the boy I had stayed up all night rocking when he had colic. The boy whose little hand once clutched mine while crossing the street. And he was choosing him. His father. The man who had walked out on me after 18 years of marriage. The man who had cheated on me with his secretary, throwing away everything we had built together for a woman half my age. The man who had only ever been a weekend dad. I felt the courtroom sway slightly as Caleb's words echoed in my ears. I want to live with Dad. I blinked. I almost didn't believe what I had heard. My lawyer placed a hand on my wrist, giving me a look of quiet sympathy, but I barely registered it. I stared at my son, the baby I had brought into this world, the boy I had raised and loved with every ounce of my being, and he wouldn't even meet my eyes. He was 16, old enough in the eyes of the court to choose where he wanted to live. And despite everything, he chose his father. He didn't look back at me once as he walked out of the courthouse. The first few months without Caleb were a blur of sorrow and disbelief. I would come home from work to an empty, suffocating house. His room was exactly as he had left it, posters of his favorite soccer team still taped to the walls, school books still scattered on his desk. His sneakers were still by the door. But the house was quiet. Unnaturally quiet. I'd sit on the couch, staring at my phone, waiting. Waiting for Caleb to call. Waiting for him to text. Waiting for anything that would remind me that he still existed, that he was still my boy. But the calls didn't come. The messages never arrived. At first, I made excuses. He's just busy adjusting. He's still angry about the divorce. He needs time. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been discarded. Erased. Replaced. It stung more than anything. Not just the divorce, not just losing my husband, but losing my son too. I tried calling him at first, but my calls often went unanswered. The few times he did pick up. His tone was curt, almost annoyed. Hey, Mom. Can't talk right now. Busy with Dad. Or worse, he simply let my calls go to voicemail. I told myself not to take it personally, but how could I not? One evening, in a moment of weakness, I drove by my ex-husband's house. Through the large bay window, I saw Caleb sitting at the kitchen table, laughing with his father. Laughing. The sight knocked the air from my lungs. That night, I sat in my living room, hugging one of his old hoodies to my chest. I buried my face in the fabric, but it no longer smelled like him. Eventually, I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I let him go. It took me 2 years to heal, too long. Excruciating years. I forced myself to focus on my own life. I threw myself into work, picking up extra projects to fill the empty hours. I took up yoga. I went to wine tasting events with coworkers. I redecorated the house, painting over the memories that clung to the walls like stains. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I made new friends, women who had been through their own heartbreaks and knew the subtle language of sorrow. We would spend Saturday afternoons at cafes, talking about everything and nothing. I traveled for the first time in years, visiting Italy and Greece, the places I had once dreamed of but never dared to see. I wandered the cobbled streets of Rome, tasting the sun-ripened tomatoes and homemade pasta, letting the rich wine dull the ache in my chest. And eventually, I met him. Nathan. Steady. Kind. Constant. He was nothing like my ex-husband. He was the kind of man who called when he said he would, who held the door open for me without making a show of it, who left small notes on my bathroom mirror just to make me smile. And for the first time in years, I felt safe again. I felt loved again. I hadn't seen or spoken to Caleb in 5 years. After he chose his father over me, I forced myself to move on. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped asking mutual friends about him. I didn't send birthday messages or Christmas cards. I let him go. But even though I told myself I was at peace with it, there were nights when I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he ever thought of me. Did he miss me at all? Did he ever regret leaving me behind? Or had he erased me completely? For years, I convinced myself that I was okay without him. I filled the emptiness with travel, work, and new love. I convinced myself that the maternal ache in my chest had dulled, that I no longer felt the sting of his rejection. But all of that was a lie. Because when I opened the door and saw him standing there, 5 years older, disheveled and desperate, my heart lurched in my chest. For a moment, I could hardly breathe. Caleb. His face had matured, no longer the 16-year-old boy I remembered, but the face of a man. His once round cheeks were now chiseled with sharper lines, and he had a slight stubble shadowing his jaw. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were still the same, except now, they were filled with desperation and shame. Mom, he croaked, barely able to meet my eyes. Please. I need your help. I stared at him, too stunned to speak. For a heartbeat, I almost wanted to pull him into my arms. Almost. But then the memories came flooding back, the day he stood in that courtroom and chose his father over me. The years of silence that followed. The photos of him smiling next to his father while I sat alone in my empty house. And suddenly, I was back in the present, standing before a stranger in my doorway. Caleb's hands trembled slightly as he clutched the strap of his duffel bag. His clothes were rumpled, and his face was gaunt, as though he hadn't been sleeping well. I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice cool. Steady. He let out a shaky breath, blinking rapidly, as though trying to hold back tears. I need money, he stammered. Please, Mom. I'm in trouble. I blinked slowly, processing his words. Money. That was why he was here. Not because he missed me. Not because he was sorry. Not because he loved me. No. He had come for my wallet. I didn't invite him in. I stood with my hand braced on the edge of the doorframe, gripping it tightly, as though holding on to something solid would keep me from crumbling. Caleb's words tumbled out in a frantic, rambling rush. Dad's business went under, he said breathlessly. Everything collapsed. He made some bad investments. And now he's in serious debt. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, unmoved. He lost the house, Caleb continued, his voice cracking slightly. He had to sell everything. He's drowning in legal fees, and I. His eyes darted away, filled with embarrassment. I lost my job. My expression didn't change. I'm behind on my student loans. I maxed out my credit cards. The rent's overdue. I'm out of options. I could hear the sheer desperation in his voice, but I remained still, stoic, detached. I didn't ask him for details. I didn't ask how he had spent the money or why he hadn't saved any of it. I didn't ask how he had let himself get to this point. Instead, I asked a far simpler question. Where's your father? Caleb winced at the mention of him. He shifted uncomfortably, suddenly looking anywhere but at me. Dad's gone, he muttered. Took off. Left me to deal with everything. I almost laughed. Of course, he did. Richard had always been like that, a man of fleeting loyalty. I should have known that the moment the money ran out, he would leave Caleb to fend for himself. My son's lips trembled slightly, but he quickly masked it with a forced bravado. I just need a little help to get back on my feet, he said, forcing a tight smile. Just a loan, Mom. That's all I'm asking for. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. For a brief moment, I saw the boy he once was, the little boy with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks who used to run into my arms when he was hurt. But that boy was long gone. This man standing before me, was the same one who had abandoned me when I needed him most. I stared at him for a long moment, my face unreadable. You chose him, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb blinked, confused. What? I stared into his eyes, unflinching. You chose your father. I repeated, louder this time. You stood in that courtroom 5 years ago and said you didn't want me. You picked him. His face paled. His lips parted slightly as though he wanted to say something, but no words came. I shook my head slowly, my throat tightening with long-buried emotion. You left me, I whispered. For him. And now that he's ruined you, you're here. At my door. Caleb's eyes welled with tears, and for a fleeting moment, I saw guilt flash across his face. Mom, please, he begged, his voice hoarse. I was stupid. I was a kid. I didn't know. No, I cut him off sharply. You knew. I swallowed hard, my voice hardening. You were old enough to know exactly what you were doing. You made your choice, Caleb. And now, you can live with it. His eyes widened with shock and disbelief. Mom, but I was already shutting the door. I looked into his eyes one last time, those same eyes that once filled with love for me but had since turned away, and then I closed the door in his face. I heard him pound his fist against the wood. Mom, please. He shouted, his voice breaking. Please, I'm sorry. Just let me in. Please. But I didn't open the door. I stood there, my forehead pressed against the cool wood, listening to him cry on the other side. He sobbed. He begged. He wailed my name like a broken child. But I didn't answer. And eventually, he was gone. That night, I sat at the dinner table with Nathan, the man who had stood by me when I was at my lowest. The man who had picked up the broken pieces of my heart and carefully, patiently put them back together. We ate slowly, drinking wine and talking about nothing in particular. For the first time in years, I felt light. Whole. Unburdened. I glanced at my phone, which sat silently on the table. No missed calls. No texts. Caleb hadn't tried again. And I knew he wouldn't. I felt no guilt. No sadness. No regret. Because the moment I shut that door, I freed myself from the last fragment of my old life. Caleb had made his choice. And now, I had made mine. When dinner was finished, Nathan and I walked out to the balcony. The night was clear and cool, and the stars were scattered across the sky like diamonds. Nathan slipped his arms around my waist and pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. Are you okay? He murmured softly. I smiled, a genuine, easy smile. I'm perfect, I whispered. And for the first time in a long, long time, I truly was.